Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today, I am joined by the lovely Livia J. Elliot, thank you so much for joining me, Livia.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Kai. It's been, we have talked for so many years, like to finally we get to talk in person or
It's
face
an
to face at least.
Yeah, well, with the power of the internet, right? We can talk this way. It's amazing. You're right. We have been talking for quite a few years, and it's taken this long for us to sit down and actually have a conversation. So I'm really looking forward to chatting with you today. I have so many
Same.
questions.
Really looking forward to it, especially because you have been guilty of extending my TBR
Oh no.
with your with your
I
recommendations. So yeah,
I apologize, but I hope they were all good reads.
and we're all good reads. That's
Good.
true.
And we've got Tim with us here. We have Fernando as well. Thank you so much
That's
for
my
joining
partner.
us. Oh, lovely. Lovely. Thank you so much for joining us. So, before we get started, I do want to give a little shout out because here in Canada, and I'm not sure where else in the world, but we are celebrating Mother's Day this weekend. So, for all the mothers out there, huge shout out. I hope you have a spectacular time celebrating, either with alone time that may be much needed or with your family and loved ones. So, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. And with that, could you give us a little introduction to yourself, Livia?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Livia J, Elliot, as you have seen there in my name. And I started writing a long while. I published my first book last year, The Genesis of Change, which you have behind you.
Yes.
But before that, I have been publishing interactive fiction in my app, Unearthed Stories. Yeah, that one. And also here, the app that I developed with my partner. So this one is actually going into a second anniversary, so we have been publishing nonstop since 2023. It's been a ride.
Congrats.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. And then I started podcasting, I think it was at the end of 2023, if I recall correctly. So my podcast is also heading on, it's on to season 2 right now, which I never expected that to happen.
Wow, that's
Uh, yeah,
amazing. So
yeah.
my first question is gonna have to be, how do you juggle it all?
I'm very organized. So I generally know exactly when I'm more productive for writing or when I don't have the mindset for writing or for reading. And, so I try to juggle that. If I know, for example, if I get very tired after my work, I will probably just read and then work on the
Okay.
podcast. Yeah. And I have like a whole to-do list that I keep moving and organizing based on everything that I have and the deadlines that I have. So that's how I juggle it. And yeah,
Okay.
last year I actually did quite a lot, but it can get, it's a lot in general.
Yeah. Well, you're writing, you're podcasting, you're working on an interactive story app, and goodness knows what else you have going on outside of all of that. So yeah, I imagine you have to be quite organized to keep it all
Yeah.
straight because you have deadlines within all of that too for each one, I
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially because in the app, that we try to do those
Mhm.
thematic releases like with the elusive pathways or future societies, which was a sci-fi. So for those, I will try to write one story and the other, and I had to coordinate beta readers and to have everything there, and then the update and you know
And yeah,
you
all the
helped us a
advertising.
lot with the cover reviews, so I will have to have the material prepared in some time. And also I do all of the covers and most of the design myself as well. So that's also
That's a
something that
lot.
I need to juggle there. Yeah.
Yeah, because even just, I know doing some graphics that I've done for advertising and things like that, it takes time. And
Takes a lot of
then
time. Yeah.
you gotta get all the info there and send it off and make sure everyone has it. If you're doing a cover reveal with 20 people helping you, that's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot. And also, I'm in Australia, so I generally have to calculate all the time zones and, I
Yes.
give you like all the time zones because it
Thank
can get
goodness for you.
confusing. Yeah.
It's a lot. I always say the time zones are the, weakness of any booktuber, content creator in any
Yeah.
fashion because trying to organize to meet up on the right time across the world
Can be
is
crazy. Like
yeah.
I have had some podcast episodes across 4 or 5 time zones at the same time. So 2 time zones in USA, so East Coast, West Coast, then UK, then 2 time zones in Australia, and it was insane.
Oh my God.
There were so few hours that we actually had in common,
Yeah.
And even if I have done like also USA, Spain, UK, and Australia, and it can get complicated. And it's generally for a single episode, it's probably 2 weeks or 3 of back and forth. Can you do it at this time? Can you do it at the other?
Yeah.
Whatever. And then we have finally get an hour, and somebody says like, that day, that weekend, I cannot be there.
Oh no. I imagine too,
You're drawing board.
schedule. That's a nightmare. Oh.
Yeah.
Well, it's a lot of work, but for good reason. You
Yeah.
have a lot of passion for what you do very
Oh,
clearly,
thank you.
and you have a lot of creativity behind it as well. And so we're going to talk about quite a bit of that today because I want to touch a little bit on each bit of what you do, whether it's podcasting, writing, and so
Yeah.
on. So, but first, I do want to give a little, I guess, a window or an idea for folks watching what they might be in for when they're reading your books. Because whether it's on the interactive app or through the novelizations that you have done, you're quite the philosophical and emotional writer, which I love.
Oh,
So,
thank you.
what do you want readers to walk away with after reading your books?
Probably the same thing that I like to walk away when I read, because at the end of the day, I'm also a reader, and that's something to think about.
Yeah.
I like the type of books that after I finish reading, I will either give me an idea or will show me a different perspective, something that I can start thinking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like books that will sometimes go out of the ordinary. I generally read because of novelty and because of curiosity. So I don't need, for example, a clear motivation. Anything that's different will generally get me in, So
Yeah.
that's a lot. Yeah. And when I write in general, I think that the thing that starts all my stories, at least for me, is a theme that I want to tackle or the idea that I want to cover in there.
Right.
And from there, I get the theme attached to a character very early.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just like, okay, what do I need to make this happen?
Yeah.
So it happens very differently. Yeah.
So yeah, because I've talked to many authors who say they got an idea of the character first and everything came after. So for you, it's a little bit different. You get an idea of a theme you want to tackle, and everything falls into place as a result.
Yeah, for example, for the one that I have currently for the Kickstarter for Dance With Me, this one I had the central allegory, and it was very quickly attached to the character because the character is part of the allegory,
Right.
And yeah. So, and I knew exactly like the qualities on the character on Lyra, which is the main character that I wanted to showcase. So that came across very quickly for me. But for example, in others, that doesn't really happen. In the interactives, I also need to give, in some cases, some leeway for the reader to create the personality of a character.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So in those cases, I need to be more open. Like there is one in particular, let me show you. For me, that one is the same series of the Genesis of Change. It happens 5 years after. And in that one, you can basically pick purple choices, which are a bit more revengeful, more angry, or green choices, which are a bit more second-guessing, imposter syndrome. So as you pick them, the events on the plot will change, but the character will change. And it reaches a point in which it is just 2 different characters. So I had to basically write one path and then the other, and then the alternatives of what happens if your events are the revengeful, but your character is on the second guessing path, So
my goodness. Yeah.
it was basically like writing 4 versions of the same character in a single story. So in that case, it was...
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, in that case, it was a bit confusing because it was the first one that I did with such a split in the character, not only on the event. So when I started writing, I realized that I wasn't able to be consistent. It reached a point in which it wasn't just a tweak on the tone or in the body beats or something. It was actually completely different reactions. not only of the main character, but of the secondary characters. And so
Yeah.
I just say like, that's it. I just wrote one path and then back to the
Okay.
other and write the other one and then the alternatives. And yeah,
Interesting.
it's a
So,
very different way of writing, you know?
well, and for interactive stories, it's a completely different way of storytelling
Yeah.
because you have so many different paths and so many different endings. But then to go the extra mile and turn that into a novelization
Yeah.
is also impressive because you're taking all of that work that you've just done and condensing it in a way that someone like myself can go to their shelf, just pick up the book and start reading without that alternative plot lines that you can choose from in the
Yeah.
app. So, did you ever feel when you went through that process that you were not necessarily hindering the original story that you had created through the interactive app, but maybe did you find the process limiting comparative to the interactive stories?
It was actually pretty interesting because Dance with Me is the first one that I have novelized.
Mm.
Genesis, for example, was never interactive. So it's a
Oh,
story that I
okay.
wrote as a book and that's it.
Yeah.
It's the same universe, but I wrote it as a book and that was different. Dance, I actually had to a bit of problems at the start because I didn't really know exactly how to translate the mechanics. So when you
Mm.
have a video game, in generally, the mechanics are how the player will interact with the game. What do you have to do? Do you have to go questing? Do you have to kill a monster? Do you have to
Yeah.
roll skills, do combos, right? Whatever. In this case, the mechanic is just you choose either a
Right.
dialogue or a, but I generally do weirder stuff like in Dance with Me because you have all the strike through text and you have the whole allegory of being
Yeah.
depressed and being in a situation in which you cannot think or acknowledge what's really happening. What I did was you would have a choice, and as soon as you took it, the main character will strike it, deny your choice, and just do something else.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
Because my intention was to do like a show not tell for the
Mm.
experience, right? Because I could give you the experience because of the mechanics, right? In that
Right.
case, and so
Very interesting.
I had a bit of a struggle in this case, knowing how to translate that. For the path in general, Dance with Me was somewhat easier because the ending is roughly the same. So you have some paths in the interactive, but the ending is roughly the same because I
Mm.
couldn't give that main character a bad ending. I had to give her something positive, you know? So,
Right. She absolutely
yeah.
deserved that ending.
So it's more about how do you get there rather
Mm.
than where do you get on the story. Right?
Right.
So the process changes. And in that case, in terms of just the choices and the paths, it was a matter of just choosing the path that I wanted, keeping the information or all the scenes that I wanted to extend because the
Mhm.
novelized version has extended scenes compared to the interactive version.
Yeah.
And then just tying that up. And something else that I realized was that I had to, in the interactive versions, when you have a couple paragraphs and then you have the choice, I
Mm.
don't need as much connection between the choice and the paragraph
Okay.
because you are seeing the button. Like as a reader, you expect, okay, here is where the story
Yeah.
poses, here is where I get the interaction. But in the text, that doesn't happen. You expect the whole text to flow in a different way. So I had to
Yeah.
add those bits of flow as well. And yeah, that was mostly what I changed on this one. Something that was very interesting as well is that I originally wrote Dance with Me in 2022. So the app was
Okay.
published in 2023, but it wasn't. This one wasn't the last story from the first batch.
Mm.
So my writing has changed quite a lot. And
Right.
when I was basically going through it, I didn't want to change, keep it as the original. So it was a learning process of going through it and saying like, I was doing that before and now I forgot, or I have improved this bit, and I was trying to write
Yeah.
like my old self rather than my current self, just too much there. And I
Right.
think that given the comments that I got, that came across nicely, but it was a lot of staring at the screen and thinking, that part of the writing which you are not actually writing but thinking.
Yeah, a lot of time processing and trying to plan. So it sounds like you rose to
Sorry,
it.
I think I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Oh, let's see. We'll figure this out. I can hear you. Folks,
There?
can you hear Livia as well? No? Okay. Here.
One minute.
No worries at all. We'll be
I
here.
think sorry, it's always going to happen that you have technical issues.
It's all part of it. Yeah, it's when you're trying to do these things, there's always going to be some form of technical
Not
issue.
quite sure what happened there.
Let us try and figure this out, folks. While you are waiting, let us know what you're reading right now.
Yes, you're back. No, you're muted now.
That is very true. You can hear me now, okay? No? All right. Well, we're going to keep trying. But I want to hear what everyone is reading right now. Are you reading fantasy,
I'm
sci-fi,
so sorry.
something
Not
different?
sure what happened there.
That's all good.
So
Let's.
I'm trying all my headphones to see which one works. One moment, I will mute the microphone and see if I can change.
Let's see. We've got Brighton here reading mostly fantasy. And welcome, Brighton. Lovely to see you here. Thanks for joining us. And you've got Titus Grown, the king of Elfland's daughter. That's a lot going on at once. How are they treating you? Tim, cozy. Yes, cozy and dark fantasy at the moment. How can you not? That's the only way to balance out the dark fantasy, I think, is to read a cozy fantasy along with it. Also, which ones are you reading? If it's a cozy fantasy, especially, or dark fantasy, I love both. I want to know what they are. Brighton, Titus Grown is one I have to strap in. Ooh, okay. Yeah, there's been so many books coming out lately. It's been hard to keep track of what everyone's reading, all the new releases, all the reads everyone's trying to catch up on from previously released books that got pushed down to TBR Mountain, as dangerous as that can be. Right now, I am in the middle of Unbound by Michael R. Miller, which is book 2 in the Songs of Chaos series. And yeah, I'm about halfway. So far, so good. Better than Ascendant, which is book 1. And I'm really enjoying particularly Holt. Holt? Is it Holt? I always confuse the names. Holt and Ash, their story. There is more POVs in this one, which I'm enjoying, but I do want to see more of Ash and Holt. And Livia, can you hear me?
Yes, finally.
Oh, lovely.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. It happens. We're talking about what we're currently reading.
Oh, I finished a very interesting one that everybody has to read.
Oh, okay. Well, can we hear about it?
Yeah, it's Snail on the Slope. It's actually a sci-fi, and
Okay.
it's a very interesting absurdist sci-fi at the style of Catch 22. You know,
Okay.
so it's a type of book that if you read, you have to take a step back and realize that it's not really what's written there. You know.
Right. Okay. Interesting. It's the one that makes you think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more
Yeah.
about like, and it was actually banned for like 20 years.
Oh, was it really? Okay.
I was preparing a podcast episode on that one actually. So,
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So, in that,
I'm
with
sorry
that,
about the technical issues.
oh,
It's bound to happen, you know.
it's always bound to happen with these. All good. With that being mentioned, if anyone is watching now or later, definitely go check out the description to go check out the Kickstarter that is live right now that Livia has going for Dance With Me, her podcast, website, everything else. Just go check out the links in the description. Check out the podcast. Check out the
Thank you.
Kickstarter by all means. So with that, I know we had a little technical issues there, but basically my thought from before was that it sounds like you really rose to the challenge of trying to put this from an interactive story into a novelization. And you had so many factors to consider, and you nailed it, in my opinion. So
Oh, thank you.
kudos, because you can tell there's work and time put into it. But I think what continues to blow me away is the striking realism with the emotional aspect.
Thank
And
you.
as a reader, that I can only imagine how much time and thought that takes to get that across to the reader, to write that on a page, tell a story about a character, and have a reader feel that emotionally impacted is quite the skill. So if you
Oh,
have
thank you.
secrets, please share.
I think that with Lyra in particular, I think she's a character that I thought the most. So I generally I'm a
Mm,
very extreme plotter. Like I will
right.
plot every single detail, and with her in particular, I mapped her emotional journey. So I knew where I wanted her to start and where I wanted her to end. And I also, because this is mostly allegorical, I also knew like the things that are part of the allegory that I wanted to bring into her character, like for example the toxic positivism that she has
Mm,
and how she can always be so
yeah.
positive, and it's a bit sad because even in real life we tend to see that and we are generally awed by those people,
Mhm.
like they are going through so much and they keep cheering up, and it's actually quite toxic,
Yeah,
but it
absolutely.
appears as laudable. So I actually wanted to pull that contradiction as well
Mm,
into the story. So that one, I think it was quite difficult to write as well, especially because Dance with Me in general, it's centered on mental health. That's
yeah.
true. Like her journey is mostly an inner journey because besides being moved from one shelf to another, because she's a doll, the character doesn't travel much, right?
Yeah.
So that was exactly what I needed to map, like where she will go and what will
Mm,
happen there. And I also tried to tie in some of the different bits that will add to her change of perception. Like, for example, when she meets the sisters on the first
mm,
chapter, she's pretty terrible to them. She makes some nasty comments,
yeah.
that are like, yeah, you shouldn't be doing those comments. But then
Yeah.
after everything that has happened, Lyra gains some perspective, and then she starts thinking about the sisters in a very different way, you
Mhm.
know. And that's also the other, you could say, gray area that I wanted to bring in. That
Right.
sometimes we are pretty judgmental towards other people simply because we don't have the experience, and because we don't have the
Mm,
experience, we don't have empathy, right?
yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, that's something that I wanted to bring in. I think that the one that I had a lot of trouble bringing in the story is this one. Let me see. So Our Own Rhythm is actually another standalone in the same universe, which is
Oh,
also
okay.
part of the Kickstarter. It's interactive only for now, and it's also dolls animated by magic, and there is an allegory of mental health. But the difference is that while Dance with Me is actually about emotional abuse, perhaps a bit of physical abuse, and that toxic positivism and finding yourself, Our Own Rhythm is more about anxiety, depression,
Oh,
and
okay.
bullying, and mostly around the anxiety that arrives after you have been bullied in one place and you have to go back to that place. And
Mm,
it starts
yeah.
a lot of anxiety, and that anxiety is generally nonsensical. It can be pretty difficult to understand when you have it in your head. It's even more difficult when you are witnessing it in somebody else, right? So
Absolutely.
trying to pull that out within a metaphor of dolls. I can't tell you the actual allegory on that one because it's a bit spoilery, but it's more of a transformation rather than
Okay.
what happens to Lyra. And yeah, that was pretty complex. Like there were some chapters that I actually had to rewrite entirely 3 times because I couldn't get them right. And I couldn't
Yeah.
get the beta readers will still tell me, and especially my partner, since he's a developmental editor, he will tell me like he knew exactly where I was going. He will tell me
Yeah.
like, I know where you are going. I can see the base of it there, but it's not quite. So it was
That
actually a lot of reworking on that one. Yeah.
That's amazing to have someone in your corner like that, to
Yeah.
be able to see your vision and say, "Hey, you nailed it," or needs a little bit more reworking.
I
Um,
think that's fundamental for every writer,
mm,
especially because we can get like so immersed and we have the full picture, not only of the current book, sometimes of the whole universe, 6, 7,
yeah.
10 books that hasn't been published.
Oh
And
my
we
gosh.
are writing with all that context. And
Yeah.
it's pretty easy to miss it or to fail to, remember that the reader actually doesn't have all that context. So and put it
Yes.
up in writing, and you need an external person to do that double check.
Well, and in this case with Dance With Me, for example, you're seeing it through Lyra. So
Yeah.
her worldview is very small in comparison to everything else that is, I'm sure, very clear in your vision
Yeah.
of the world and what's to come. So narrowing that vision down to make sure that it doesn't give anything away either is probably a task in its own, right?
Yeah, I'm the type of writer that has because as a reader, I tend to also pick up words, like, why did they put up this precise word here? Perhaps it has a meaning, and
Right.
so that's as I'm that precise or low level as a reader, and so I also like to do that as a writer. That is, for example, in Dance With Me, when you meet one character in particular, Margot, that she's a clockmaster,
Yes.
she will say something that she needs to align all the clocks in the world, so there
Mhm.
is something in there. But that
Yeah.
was as much as I could actually put up there to imply the larger world, simply because it was also irrelevant to the current story. It doesn't
Right.
matter if I have the whole world building in there. It's not really relevant. You only need a bit of a sentence to realize that this character in particular has a lot of responsibility, and that's it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
especially
yeah,
if they're just a moment in the
in
story.
the
Yeah,
book, yeah.
yeah. So it sounds like you spend quite a bit of time narrowing down what you need versus what, um, you can save for later.
Yeah, uh, I think it also depends on the type of stories as well and the complexity of a world. I think writing interactives taught me a lot around that because if you
Okay.
do, suppose that in a book, you have a character that gets into the room and the character starts looking around, right? That's
Mhm.
okay because
Yeah.
it's quite a normal scene. But if suddenly in an interactive in which you have like 3 paragraphs per page, you have to
Mm.
waste like a whole page only in a description. It gets
Yeah.
pretty boring because the reader player goes to the interactive with the expectation that they will have control over the story,
Right.
right? So doing
Interesting.
the descriptions in there is pretty different. Something that I generally use in that case is to give you the option to look around. You know,
Right.
are you
Yeah.
interested in actually going around the room and checking it or not, or do you just want to go straight to the point? And so that taught me a lot about being very precise, and very narrow into what I need to put up in terms of information.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very true. I wouldn't think of that because 'cause I've tried the interactive stories, and I am the type of person where I'm too afraid to make a choice. So I would sit there and think way too long about my options, and the possible implications, but I I wouldn't think that you'd have to be that particular when you're writing it and that mindful of the type of readers you're gonna have playing those interactive games and the power that they
Yeah,
want over the story, which is a completely different experience from just picking up a book and
exactly.
reading.
It's also
Yeah.
a different expectation on how you engage with the story. If you
Mm,
think about books in general, for example, think of The First Law, right? That's a very
mm,
straightforward book. So,
yeah.
yeah, it's beautiful. I love the trilogy, but you are expected to sit down and just go through it, right?
Yes.
Now,
Yeah.
if you look at, for example, The Fifth Head of Cerberus by Gene Wolfe, that book is a puzzle. Like, he was actually
Mm,
expecting the reader to finish a book and start picking up the clues that he left as if
yeah.
it were a puzzle. So there is a different expectation as to how you engage. Another example I could give you is a famous from Cortázar, Hopscotch, which is actually a book that you should read, picking up the chapters in different order because that changes the sequence of events and creates a different
Yeah.
story. Right.
Yeah.
So those writers were aiming for a different type of engagement. When you have an interactive, you have to assume that as a baseline, the reader player wants to have some control and some agency over the story, right? And if
Yeah.
you spend like 3 pages describing, that basically takes the agency away.
Oh,
So
it's so complicated.
so there are those other details that you have to
Yeah.
consider. And at the start, because I came from writing books, right? When I started with my first stories on the interactives, so my partner being a video game developer, he will play them and tell me like, this is boring. And that's a
Right.
ludonarrative dissonance, that what you are doing in terms of mechanics doesn't match up with what you are doing in terms of narrative, right?
Yeah, right, makes sense.
Right, because if you want your reader to have, or in this case, the reader or the player to have curiosity, your mechanics should actually imply that curiosity or satisfy that curiosity.
Right.
So
Yeah,
that is how I...
the more curious they are, the more they want to stick around and find out what's going to
Right.
happen.
But also, for example, they may be scared, or the main character in the game may be under pressure, and you want your mechanics not to be boring, but to add to the pressure.
Right.
So that's also something else that I had to consider in there, and I came up with realization that, yeah, you can do descriptions in the same way.
So I am curious, with having novelizations, like novels under your belt, as well as these interactive stories, do you have a preference for one versus the other in terms of the process of writing? So do you
I
prefer
think
writing novels over interactive, or vice versa at this point?
it's always funny, because whenever I go from writing an interactive to writing a book, I will say like, "Oh, this is so much easier." Because suddenly I don't have to guess what the reader chose, because in an interactive, I have to account for whether you chose path A or path B. In a book, if you're in chapter 5, I can assume that you read everything before, unless you skip the prologue,
Right. So it's like a
that's
vacation.
already, yeah. So that's a simplification that I have there. But then there are, I think it's also different, because in a story, you can put up clues, and that's okay. You know that if you put the clue there, they may pick it up or not, but it's there, you can tie it up. However, in an interactive, if I have a character saying something to a secondary character, suppose that they are acting very angrily, the secondary character will have to react in an appropriate way. But if the main character chooses to just be passive, the secondary character will actually just have to respond to that. So every choice has a lot of repercussions, which are beyond where you go and what happens to the story. So you can create a plot hole simply, or a character, a problem in the character, simply by not linking up those types of, the most classic one is that you have a character close your eyes in one choice, and in the other they keep the eyes open, and then when you pick close eyes, you never open the eyes again. So
right. You have to be careful.
It can go, it can go to that minutia as well. So there is, I think, when with the interactives, there is so much more to consider than just a story, because you have, at least I have to consider as well how I want the reader player to engage with the story. Do I want to frustrate them? Do I want to experience all the choices that my characters have? Do I want them to feel the anger that my character has? Or because it's also kind of like a game and we have effects. Suppose that there is a thunderstorm. Do I want to have the thunderstorm there? What happens if suddenly I am narrating a very quiet, tense scene and I make the phone vibrate?
Right.
That should give you a shoulder, right? So there is all of that, all of those extra things that I can play with. So, for example, I'm not going to say much, but in this scene, in Dance With Me, when it happens, you get a very specific effect, visual effect on top of a text.
Oh, interesting.
So, and that adds to the narrative as well, because in some cases, if I tell you it's dark in a book, that's okay. But in the interactive, I can put up a whole frame that makes it darker, and I can show you it's dark.
Oh, you have a lot more to play with. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So there are more things that I can do there that I can't do in a book, So there are some stories that I can tell there or not. And for example, to give you an example, this one, Means of Egress, that one, I think it's the most complex that I have written. but it's basically one character versus another. You control one, the other attempts to narrate your story. And what
Oh,
happens is that if you disobey a lot, this one has control over the game and will just kick you off the game.
oh my
Literally just
gosh.
kick you off and say like, off you go to the real world.
Oh my
Because it breaks the fourth wall, right? And
Yeah.
doing that, you can do that in writing. There are writers that have done that, even
Right.
in movies. Deadpool writes the fourth wall a lot, speaking
Yes.
to the camera, but in
Absolutely.
that specific trick that I did there, it's not
Yeah.
something that I can do in a book. So I was thinking, after I novelized Dance With Me, I started trying to think about all the other stories, and I was like, this one I will have a very hard time because of all these mechanics and things that I played
Yeah.
with, that I'm not really sure how I pull up in a book.
Yeah. That would be much trickier, though I'm sure if you
Yeah.
had enough time to sit with it, you could probably figure something out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could
But it
see how
wouldn't
that
be
would
the
be
same
hard.
effect. It will be more like an approximation.
Absolutely. Yeah. It would
Because in the
definitely
in the in the interactive, after the character says that, you literally get a pop-up, and then it gets you out of the game.
like
It
you're
gets
done.
you back to you're done. But I don't want you here, says the character. You can come back, and
Yeah.
when you come back, because at the point they will make a comment like, "Why you're here again?"
Right, right. So it continues on. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
That
Okay.
actually is like it's a bit complex because it's a dungeon crawler with a bit of philosophy. There is a theme as to why
Yeah.
it's a dungeon crawler, but it's also a time loop. So whenever you reach the end of the dungeon, you will get back to the beginning and something happens because not every ending is the
Right.
actual ending. And so
Yeah.
I think I had 182 different ways of going through it, which is,
Oh
yeah, I
my
had to take
gosh.
a lot of things into account. I was going nuts, and that happened because my partner came in and told me when I did the plotting, I was just like,
Yeah.
mighty plot. And he came and told me, scope creep. It's going to get out of hand. I was just, nah, I can do it. Spoiler
Yeah.
alert, I had to tone it down. you know,
Right. You were there, that GIF with the guy, and he's got all the strings on the
all the
papers and the
plots. Yeah.
theories. Yep. Wow, okay. Well, so if anyone has not tried interactive stories and you want to, definitely go check it out. It's Unearthed Stories, I believe it is, and the
Yeah.
link will be in the description too.
And we have a question from
Yeah.
Tim. I think it's
Oh,
very
yes.
interesting. Yeah, so that one for plotting, yeah, it was insane. So basically, what I did, it's a dungeon, right? So I did the map,
Mm.
and I did the map in layers because in the first stage you can't discover the whole dungeon, so that already pruned some paths.
Oh my
In
gosh.
the second stage, you can go to additional paths, but there are some rooms you can no longer visit, right? So I had to put up some of those tricks, and then I had, for example, cases of the player still wants to go there because at the end of the day, in an interactive story or even in a game, you are giving the illusion of agency, right? The
Mm,
reader player has to believe they can actually affect the story, but they can only affect it so much as how the writer planned for that effect. Right.
right.
So I had to resort to tricks like, yeah, you want to go there, but then you have this other narrator on top of it. And they say, like, no, you're not going there. Off you go, I will close the door. So I had to get very imaginative and come up with ideas to just cut the variability and reduce the number of paths because it was becoming unmanageable. Right. And
Yeah.
I also did that of grouping them in stages so that I knew that when you move from stage 1 to a stage 2, which is completely transparent to the reader, I knew that some things at least had happened. So I
Right.
had like a core set of events that would have happened from one to the other, right, until I reached the end. And then I had to manage all the the conditionals. Did you
Mm,
visit the library? Did you went to this other, to the mirrors room? Did you went to the garden? How many times did you went to the garden? How many times did you went there? How did you end? Because
yeah.
since it is a time loop that you can go back, the way you end affects the way that you restart.
Mm,
Right? So
yeah.
I had to take that into account as well, and the comments both characters will make. So it was a very, very interesting thing to write, and I think I actually learned a lot. And it's I also learned a bit because that's the first one that I gave the choice that you can pick either a female character, a male character, or their. So you can use she, her,
Yeah.
he, him, their, theirs. And I was just like, it's going to be an S, the S on the verbs. It was not just an S. I had like so many variabilities on the words to account,
Yeah.
just
Yeah, you
simply because you're giving the pronouns. So it was like, when you start thinking on English grammar, in that case, I was joking that I was murdered by an S, because then my beta readers will read, and I had S's when I was using the their, they,
Yeah, yeah.
or I will
Oh my
miss it,
goodness.
or sometimes I will just write in one and try to change it after, and then I had a sudden her when the player was using him,
Yes.
It was
That's so
pretty
much
crazy.
to track. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. That was pretty difficult in that sense. Yeah.
yeah. Well, you have authors who say, trying to track doing editing and they're trying to track typos or plot holes. You've just taken that and went, whoop,
It's
the
another
whole
whole
other
level.
level,
Yeah,
you could
that's what
teach
I
a master class on it.
think. That's what I told you, that when I go back to books, it's like, this is easier in comparison. You know,
Right. Yeah. A
I'm
lot less
missing
to
a
track.
lot of, yeah, there is a lot of cognitive load that I don't have when I'm writing a book, because the plot is straightforward in a literal
Yeah.
sense. You can go from
Yeah.
chapter 1 to chapter 10, and that's it.
Yeah, I am curious. There are those puzzle stories that you can read, even ones where if you read it in one direction, you get one POV, but if you flip the book,
Yeah.
you get the other POV of the
Yeah, I have
character.
seen a few of those, yeah.
Would you ever want to write a book like that, like a novel like that?
I actually wanted to write like an interactive in that way. So
Okay,
there are some
interesting.
things that I wanted to do. Like, generally, unearthed stories, it's like my experimental ground. And
Yeah.
because it is a half game, half ebook, I give
Mhm.
myself a lot of permissions or creative permissions to do weird stuff.
Yeah,
Like, I can
absolutely.
strike through text. I can put up text in all caps. I can, tell different narratives. And I think, like, for example, this one, Static Signal Living Legacy, that has multi POVs in how they are generally done in books. So
Mm.
in interactive stories, the most common thing that you will have is a single POV, and that's the one that you control. And I was just like,
Mm.
no, I'm going to do something else. I wanted to do an interact with multiple. So I had to have some chapters in one POV, but other chapters in another POV, and have the choices of the first POV affect the second POV
Oh my
in
goodness.
a way that the reader will see it, but not the character, because sometimes the characters didn't knew each other.
Mm. Right.
So yeah.
That's a lot to try and plot out, but I imagine that by having access to this playground, like you said, it's been like a playground for you. It's actually
Yeah.
enabled you to expand your creativity.
Yeah,
Would you say that's
definitely.
true?
And I will say that's definitely true. There are a lot of things that there are also stories that I also think immediately in an interactive way. Because
Yeah.
at the start, when I started writing this for the first watch, I thought in a more straightforward sense, like, this is a story. How can I add interactivity to it?
Right.
But
Yeah.
as I started writing more and more, I started thinking, like, I have this mechanic, or I want to try this type of interaction, and I have
Mhm.
this theme. How can I blend those two together? So it's a
Right.
different way of thinking through the storytelling in general, because you have, at the end of the day, it's a similar medium, but it's not quite completely the same.
Yeah,
So there
absolutely.
are some things that I can play differently. And yeah, as you said, being able to do all of those other tricks, it has
Yeah.
given me so much. And it has happened that sometimes I'm writing a book and say, like, I will do this way if I go interactive. And it's just like, yeah, I'm not there. I can't do
Yeah,
that.
but you can note for later.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah, definitely.
amazing. Yeah, it sounds like you've challenged yourself, you've given yourself opportunity to expand your creativity when it
Yeah.
comes to storytelling. That's all amazing. To be able to have the opportunity to do that is amazing.
Yeah.
And Tim here has a comment as well, saying, "I've written large segments of text in French, but I picture trying to write a novel in French and I shiver with dread. Writing in another language is tough." Yeah, I struggle with French. French is our secondary language
Yeah.
here for the English provinces, and yeah, it's rough. If you have a hard time learning languages, yeah, there's a lot of rules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think like I actually haven't written in Spanish in over a decade. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
yeah.
So would it
I write
feel
and do everything in English. Yeah.
yeah, would it feel weird, do you think, going back to writing in Spanish?
I will say so because it's a very different language, so the roots are
Mhm.
different. But
Yeah.
it's also how you explain or how you say things, the sentence structure, the grammar. Like,
Yeah.
for example, in Spanish, you don't use quotes for a dialogue; you use an M dash, and that
Oh,
changes how you use the M dash. You generally don't use it in the way that you use it in English, which in English you can use an M dash and a semicolon for different types of pauses.
oh my
In
goodness.
Spanish, you have only a semicolon because you don't really use it, right? It's
Okay.
more common to use passive voice than to use, and you have implicit subject. So that's something that
Mm,
you can. So there are a lot of things in there that are pretty different. And also, I think some some words are better that you can do a lot of games in with that. For example, the verb be. You have two. One is to be, like I'm happy, and
mm.
another is the type of verb that I use for I'm here.
Right, yes,
So
yeah.
you can play a lot with that. But for example, you have a single word for smile.
Right,
And in
right,
English,
so
you have like 10, and then you have to start adding adjectives. So the
right.
adjectives are not necessarily as bad as they could be in English, because in English
Mm,
you can choose a smirk or simper or
yeah,
whatever, and that's it. In Spanish, you have to describe it.
interesting.
So
It's
yeah,
a completely different way of storytelling.
yeah, I will say
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. I find that fascinating too, 'cause like I said, I've tried to learn French and failed. I have enough to ask for a cup of coffee at the store, and that's about it. But the learning different languages and the language structures and the cultural impacts of language is absolutely fascinating. And
Yeah,
I've had the opportunity to speak with authors who have written in their native language and then rewritten or written other stories in English. And they have to change their way of storytelling to accommodate the different audiences because storytelling for one culture may be plot
it's some
driven,
different.
but for
Yeah.
another, it's character, right? So it's,
Yeah, and also what you consider plot driven is
mm,
different from different cultures. Like the expectation could be different as well. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And
we're,
I think that's something also that I find super fascinating is how everything that's lost in translation and how the voice of an author can actually change from the original to the translation. Like
yeah,
two that I can tell you that are similar but not quite so are Tolkien and Poe. I have read both
yeah,
of them in English and in Spanish, and
okay.
it's pretty different. There are some things similar, but there are some nuances that get lost. You know,
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, because there are, metaphors, I'm sure, sayings that just
yeah.
won't translate well.
And for example, the name of the wind. I'm not sure if you read it.
I haven't read it, no, but I am
No.
familiar with it.
So there is a very. I'm trying not to spoil anything then, but
Mm,
there is a very specific word Rothfuss uses two synonyms in English
yeah,
that can imply a link between two characters. If you
mm,
make a connection that these two words are actually synonyms and you start picking up other clues, you can guess that there is a connection. In Spanish, that's completely lost because there aren't synonyms for that. So
right,
there is a single word for the same thing, and that's it. And they just use one and the other one. They did a very abstract translation based on color, basically. So
oh,
you have
okay,
to you are left to only pick up the other clues, and you don't have that one, which is a very obvious part. So
right, so it takes away a little bit of the it makes it
yeah,
harder to puzzle.
I will say that it really depends on the author and how they write,
Mm,
and yeah, and how they use the language in general.
I could see that, yeah, and So speaking of, I just want to shift a little bit here because
Yeah.
you also podcast. In
Yeah.
addition to everything, you podcast, and I'm really curious why podcasting in particular. Why not videos or other formats? What was it about podcasting that you said, "Yeah, that's for me," and I have some things to say?
Yeah. So I love analyzing books. I After I read a book, and you know that my reviews are like essays because I tend
Yeah.
to go very in depth, and I will just for my partner, I will just annoy him like talk about books and books and books and books and books. And one day he told me like, "You can just do a podcast, you know." There are people that may be interested as well. And I said like,
Absolutely.
that's a great idea. So I went in and I decided for a podcast mostly because I think you require a bit less. So with a video, you need to have like a whole setup. The edition
Mhm.
is far more difficult, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah, with a podcast, I can just do audio. And especially, I think that for long form content, which is what I do, like in general, my episodes last 40 minutes. Long
Yeah.
form content works better in podcast than in YouTube because at the end of the day, you just stop watching the video, keep listening, and go do something else. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was the main reason why I chose podcasting. And it has proven quite interesting as well because there are a lot of people that I have invited to my podcast that they are far more comfortable knowing that they don't have the camera, that it will be only the
Right.
audio. You know, so
Yeah,
sometimes we
absolutely.
get very interesting conversations or jokes or things like that. That
Yeah.
yeah, simply
Um,
because they're more comfortable. Yeah.
yeah, it does make a difference. I know I've had guests come on, they're like, "This is my first time. Is everything okay?" And they have that, nervousness to them, and I completely understand. When I started, I was
Yeah.
deer in headlights, you know? So I imagine it takes a little bit of that pressure off. They can relax a bit more. I
It's
am
also
curious.
easier to edit, you know, because I only have to
Right.
edit the audio.
That's
Otherwise,
true
I would
too. Oh
have
my
to
goodness.
prepare like slides or something to show. And yeah,
Yeah, and I'm sure with even editing that, there's not a whole lot of splicing and editing that you have to take out from the clips because it's a conversation, being in
exactly.
long form,
And
yeah.
when you are watching a video, if a person makes a pause, you can actually see them making the pause, and that
Yeah.
actually gives you the cue. But if I have in audio like 2 seconds of a pause, the
Yeah.
listeners will probably just say like, "What happened? I lost sound," you know?
Yep.
So that's something that I need to take into account when I edit the
Right. Different rules.
yeah,
Yeah.
completely.
Yeah, I know with video editing, there's a lot of splicing to take out some pauses, but also there's something called J cuts, and L cuts where if you have 2 clips, and you're gonna pop one video clip just over the other so that they overlap a little bit, and it keeps the flow going consistently and quickly. Because if you don't have it quick and consistent, especially with the way the algorithms work, people will click off. If you have
Yeah,
too much of a little break in between thoughts and ideas, and then you have to put the visual in of the zooms and things like that. So, yeah, it's
that's a lot
interesting
of
to see the
work.
different
Yeah,
side of it. Yeah.
yeah.
I know in terms of content creation, I've made videos that I've loved and they've not performed well. So I am curious for yourself in terms of that kind of situation. Has there been a podcast that you absolutely loved working on, creating, but maybe didn't perform as well as you might have thought given your love for it?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of my last episodes, the one on
Mm,
uh, identity on Walking on Glass by Ian Banks. So
okay.
that's literally a literary fiction book. He's the same. It's funny because if you look for Ian M. Banks, he wrote the Culture series, which is a very famous sci-fi series.
Yeah.
Ian Banks, without the M, is a literary pen name, right? So that's
Oh,
why.
okay. So
Yeah.
same author, just a pen
Same
name.
author, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
I did an episode on that one that I thought it was very interesting. It was one of my favorites. It took me like so many hours to actually put up the whole script together. And it started and it was just like 0 views.
Oh,
It was like,
no.
oh. Yeah. And
Oh.
something that I find very interesting with the podcast is, yeah, I put it up in YouTube, but I
Mhm.
also put it up in Spotify, Audible,
Yeah.
in all the other platforms. I also have it on Substack. And sometimes the episodes perform very differently from one platform to another.
Yeah.
Like in YouTube, that video had no traction at all. In Substack, it's one of my most watched videos.
Interesting. Yeah.
So
So there's so many similarities because it's the same with video making. A video I
yeah,
post on TikTok won't perform as well as YouTube, vice versa. Um,
I
have
think it
you
depends
noticed
on
a
the
pattern?
people that use. Yeah, in terms of pattern, it's strange. Like my group discussions on Borges, they
Yeah.
always perform very well, no matter the platform. Yeah.
Interesting.
So,
Okay.
yeah, and that was actually something that I wasn't expecting. I picked
Yeah.
it up and said, like, let's do it because it's a very hard author to read. It's very complex
Mm,
and he's very famous. So I said, like,
yeah.
let's read it. And it's very short. So it's not like a big commitment to invite people to it. I
Yeah.
actually was surprised how well those episodes perform consistently. And in terms of content, I think that YouTube leans towards more renowned books. Like, for example, my episode on the Stormlight Archive versus
Yes.
Stoic philosophers that
Right.
I've blended the immortal words with the Stoic philosophy and a few concepts in there. That did very well. I also did an episode on the novelization of Death Stranding, the video game. So there are two books, and I
Okay.
did the. It was a very long episode, like almost an hour, and it performed very well. And
Oh,
I was actually
amazing.
surprised because I really like that one.
Oh, good. Oh, I love
Yeah.
when they perform well and you love that episode.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of validation there.
Something else that I also had is that I really like my first episode, which was on
Mm,
Fahrenheit 451. It's one of
yeah.
my favorite books, but I didn't have a good setup. And so
Oh,
when I listen, yeah, I didn't have the best editing software. My editing skills were not the best. And whenever
yeah,
I
of
listen
course.
to it, I'm just like flinching. I need to record that, re-record that.
Yeah, I think it's just a badge of honor we all have to wear when
Yeah.
we start making any kind of content. My first videos were terrible. Will they stay up on the internet? Probably. Yeah,
And then you learn to speak in a different way, to
yeah.
you gain a different cadence. And yeah, it's like you can see the whole leveling up progression in there.
Yes, absolutely, and your technology gets better, your skill with editing
Yeah.
gets better. Yeah, it's each episode gets a little bit better in that
Yeah,
regard.
definitely.
I did notice you've done, some chats with other individuals,
Of course.
authors.
Yeah.
I am really curious, is there a guest you would love to have on your podcast in the future? Kind of like your dream guest that you would love to chat with?
Stephen Erickson.
Yes?
I know that everybody invites him to talk about
Yeah.
Malas, and I want to invite him to talk about that book, Rejoice, because I
Okay.
really loved it. And it's the same author. It's not Malasan in the space,
Yeah.
not at all. It's a social sci-fi, actually. And yeah, I
Okay.
would actually love to have him over to discuss that book because I liked it so much that I did 2 episodes on it. So there is a solo episode and a group discussion. So
Oh,
you can
nice.
imagine that I really liked it.
Yes, absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
fingers crossed that that happens for you, because 'cause I'm sure that would be just a
Yeah.
highlight.
And trad authors, I also
Yeah.
have Ian Napper. I invited him twice to my podcast, actually. So
Okay,
that's
nice.
cyberpunk set in Australia. So I did 2 episodes and a solo episode as well. So yeah,
That's
you can see my
amazing.
favorites by seeing how many times they appeared in my podcast. Like 1984, I think that I
Yeah.
mention in it every 3 episodes. There is a quote of it.
There you go. Well, you have
Yeah,
your favorites, right? And those tend to stick with you. They impact
yeah,
you
definitely,
for a reason, right?
exactly.
And I know in terms of philosophical elements, and your passion for exploring them, I am really curious if someone is looking to get more into philosophical studies. Is there a book that got you started, got you passionate for it, that you'd recommend for someone else?
There are a few resources, I will say. If
Mm,
you want to get into a stoicism, there is a self-published book by, I think it's John Salzberg. I
okay.
think that's the best book that you can get because he explains like the principles of everything rather than
Right.
just giving you maxims, because Aurelius at the end of the day, he was writing a journal,
Right.
so,
Right.
and I think he's quite complex to read as well, because you need to have a lot of context of the Roman era in which he
Yeah.
lived. Otherwise, yeah, everything can get lost in there. And
Okay.
yeah, so that one by John Salzberg, I think it's a very interesting book. He goes more into the explanations and the different principles also extracted from the Nicomachean ethics. So you get
Okay.
different concepts like I always pronounce it wrong, like the eudaimonia. Oh, I think I have it here. So this is the one that I was saying. Sorry, it's completely tabbed, as you can
Oh,
see.
okay. Yes.
This is the one that I was saying. Yeah.
Okay, the little book of Stoicism.
Yeah, exactly. And that one is very good. Like it will actually explain everything in there. If you want online resources, like the Stanford, search for Stanford philosophy, and you will get,
Mm.
it's like a blog, you will get articles on that. It can get a bit dense.
Oh, I
But the good
imagine.
thing is that it's a free resource, and you
Yeah.
have posts that are entry level, posts that are a bit more complex, and they are all written by students or by professors. So
Mhm.
it's as accurate as you will get.
Okay.
Um, for a nice entry in Stoicism, Ryan Holiday, I think he's incredible
Yeah.
from Daily Stoic. Yeah, it's a great way of
Yeah.
entry.
He's
And yeah, if you want to read like one specific of the Stoics, I will say probably Seneca is the best to
mm,
me, because those are letters. So he's
okay.
letters to a friend. So he's basically just trying to explain, and it gets a bit more digestible,
Okay,
in terms
interesting.
of,
Yeah, okay. I could see that
yeah.
being easier
Yeah.
to
And
comprehend.
the problem with Aurelius as well is that there are, I think, several translations, and some of them are not very good. So
Yeah.
because they were all written in a very old time, so you really need to pick a nice translation as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think those are the best ones. Another one for Stoicism that I would can see what I like clearly. Massimo Pigliucci, he's amazing. Like he has a few books, and he also has a Substack. So if you go to Substack, you can read a lot of his posts for free
Oh,
and
that's
see if you like.
amazing.
Yeah, and he also tries to do a bit more of in practice Stoicism, rather than
Okay.
just here is a theory, you deal with it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That reminds me a little bit of Ryan Holiday, where he tries to blend the practices of Stoicism into
Yeah.
modern day principles, which I
Especially because that one is, a philosophy to put in action. It's not
yeah.
just to think out something. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am curious as well. I know we're coming to our we're at our hour there, but if you have a little bit more time, I do have
I have
some.
all the time. Don't worry.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So in that case, I'll open up questions to our chat, but I do have some rapid fire questions as well for you.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So, chat, if you have any questions, please, please, please put them in the comments below. We will definitely take a look at those. But I did read in an interview that you have a favorite character, and I was a little squealing girl when I saw this, and it's Totoro.
Oh, let me see if I can actually show you all of my Totoros.
Yes, is it crocheted on top of it all?
Yeah, that's
Oh,
crochet.
my
And I
heart.
have Totoro here as well.
So why Totoro?
Oh, I just like him. I always call that movie the movie that heals the soul. You know,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
like I think it cozy fantasy to some extent, but there are also some very nice elements in it.
Mm,
The fact that it it leaves it very open whether the girls are actually imagining it or not, and
yes.
how the father actually fosters that imagination. And
Yes.
sometimes he plays with it as well, like goes in with the whole game.
Mm,
I found it very cozy and very comforting as well.
yeah.
So that's what yeah. And
Yeah. Especially when these girls are dealing with the unknown of an ill mother, right?
yeah.
So it's a comfort in a way for them, to have that.
Yeah,
Um,
but it's also like there are so many nice messages in the story. It's like the innocence of childhood, and how through childhood, you see things very differently, and how some
mm,
problems are completely transparent to you because you're just a child.
yeah.
And There is also I think Ghibli did something very nice with the father in that movie, that
Yeah.
he gives them enough information of what is happening, but also keeps something to him, not to
Mhm.
overload because they are very, very young.
Yeah.
I think one is like 2 or 3 years old of the characters.
Yeah, she's
And
3 or 4, I think, yeah.
yeah, and there is like, I think all the imagery and everything. It's a
Yeah.
lovely movie. It's like comforting, kind.
Yeah,
You have a nice theme and a nice message as well. Everything in one
and
packet.
cute
Yeah.
character in Totoro.
Yeah, definitely.
I
I
love it.
want a big Totoro, that you can just use as a
Yes.
couch for reading, but they are very expensive.
I
So,
imagine, yeah. I much prefer a giant Totoro couch to I think it's recently there's been a gorilla sofa that's been going
yeah, I
viral.
have seen it. Yeah.
Let's bring Totoro back,
Yeah,
get rid of the
definitely.
gorillas. The gorilla sofas,
I
bring
can I
Totoro.
can sleep on the belly like in the
Yes.
movie.
So are there any other, Studio Ghibli movies that you also enjoy? Maybe kind of like a top 2?
Oh, I think I have watched so many of them. Kiki is another one that I
Mm.
really like. I
Yes.
really like that one. Yeah, it's super magical. Ariete, the
Arrietty is
one that,
beautiful, yeah,
yeah, I think
yeah,
it's quite underrated. Like so few people actually watched it.
yeah.
That a lot of people prefer the other movies, and I really liked it. And I found it in a very strange way, especially because in Spanish, I saw it first in Spanish, and it has a very different name. So for a lot of
Okay.
time, I didn't know how it was called in English.
Right, yeah.
Um, Ponyo as well.
Ponyo is beautiful too, yeah.
It's also more like Totoro. It's like the most youthful for the youngest audience and Ghibli, because then you have Princess Mononoke, which is, I think, far more adult and
Dark,
yeah,
yeah, it's a bit
yeah,
darker,
yeah.
much more serious tones to it. Yeah, The
And
Secret World very
Howl's
Oh, yeah.
Howl's also, yeah,
Oh,
Howl's
yeah.
Moving Castle. Yeah,
Howl's Moving Castle is one that I absolutely love, and it's funny because I don't care much about the romance aspect of it, but I love the found family part of it and
yeah,
how they just all of a sudden, all these people that are supposed to be, people they're hiding from are living with them,
yeah.
and they're helping them in the end, and I find that really, really sweet, and then Sophie's character, just is admirable to me. She goes from being this very self-conscious young girl into finding her confidence and stepping forward and taking
Yeah.
charge in situations, and that
And
growth is very admirable.
I love how Ghibli does the allegories, like with her getting older physically. You can
Yes.
also read it as her growing,
Yeah.
and maturing mentally as well. And then she recovers part of the innocence, because it's like she
Mhm.
acknowledges that she can still be young in her mind, or recover that innocence. And I
Yeah.
just love it. Like there are so many details on his movies. And the only thing that I like but don't like is the food. Like everything is the food is generally drawn in a way that I get hungry. And then I'm watching the Ghibli movie, it's just
No,
like I want to eat. No.
yeah. No, there's so if you look
And
on
they pay
YouTube,
so many attention to detail in the food and all of that when they throw it.
it looks so good. I've seen people, I think it's Babish, Cooking with Babish, where he's actually made the feast from Spirited
Yeah,
Away, and it's the level of detail he went to get it to look visually accurate along with what he suspected it would taste like is incredible. So, yeah,
yeah,
Studio Ghibli movies to me are one of those creations that continue to inspire other creators to
yeah,
just
definitely.
continue create. It's amazing. So when I saw Totoro was your favorite character, knew I had to bring it up.
Give me one moment, because
Yeah, absolutely.
I have Mighty Totoro as well.
Oh, there you go.
I told you I have 100 Totoros.
No, I actually we've only recently gotten stores that start to sell those things. So I'm so close to finishing a giant crocheted Totoro for
I
my
need to
son.
see it. Yeah,
I'll send you a picture. It's almost there. I've got like this much of his head left and his eyes and stuff. But yeah, it's one of those things that I think appeals to young and old. No
yeah,
matter no
definitely.
matter it has that nostalgia to the storytelling, and it I don't find many people who don't like Studio Ghibli storytelling.
Yeah, that's true. And I also think, like, following up in what you said about the layers that Ghibli does, is that you can watch it as a kid and see something, but if you are watching it as an adult, you can see like all the layers I put up there, all the different meanings, and it's beautiful in general.
Yeah, even with Totoro, the older sister, you see the weight she carries because
Yeah,
she's trying to be strong for her little sister and take on the role of a mother while her mother is away.
yeah.
And, when you're watching that as a kid, I'm sure that doesn't you don't understand all of that to that depth. You might get glimpses of it, but, as you get older, I think it would make more sense. So, yeah, absolutely. In terms of, more of a rapid fire questions, I know that wasn't really rapid fire. It wasn't intended to be rapid fire, but that's okay. For some final rapid fire questions, can you give us 3 book recommendations, whether it's underrated, beloved books, 3 books you think more people should read?
Oh, interesting. I generally have a lot of problems recommending because I like weird stuff.
That's
So
all right. Bring it on.
let me see. Probably The Book of a New Sun. That will be
Okay.
one. But
Yeah.
it's especially if you like frame narratives and extremely unreliable narrators, that could
Mm,
be one. It's a sci fantasy, and the only caveat is that he writes sentences that are very long, so the
mhm,
prose may not be everyone's style. And it's a book that generally will give you a premise, but then life happens to a protagonist and he just
mm.
gets steered away. So it's a kind of a story that you just have to let it take you somewhere, you know?
Right. Yeah,
It's
that
a
might not be
very,
for everyone, but it might be right up
yeah,
others' other alleys. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And all classical sci-fi that I really liked was Babel 17 by
Okay.
Samuel Delany. And that one it's interesting because it's a space opera-ish to some extent, but
Yeah.
it also the whole thing on the ships is very differently. Like they are connected to the ships in a different way. The ships
Right.
are not military based. You have
Mhm.
like the nose, the ear, the eyes, the people on those
Oh,
roles in the ship connect in a different way. There are people that are incorporeal that actually control some of the systems in the ships, and you can only communicate with them in just for a second and then forget what they told you because they
right.
don't have bodies. So it has a lot of weird
Yeah.
stuff that it generally goes very away from the space opera and what you will find on our traditional, navy style ships in
Yeah.
the space. So
Interesting.
that theme is very interesting, and it also has, I think, the key theme of it is linguistic relativity. So
Mm.
if you want to think a bit about what he was saying, that's a great book. He does have some literary ergodic elements, which is
Okay.
basically ergodic elements are how you structure the text on the page. So
Right.
there are some pages in which the text is weirdly structured. And
Okay.
my recommendation will be just get it on a paperback because
Okay.
otherwise in an ebook, I'm not sure how that's going to look.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So but it's a very short story. I think it's just less than 300 pages, which
Okay.
in
Yeah.
sci-fi and yeah,
Yeah.
it's a standalone, so you can just dive into it. And even if it is all the characterization is very good, I think it has aged decently well compared to other old stuff
Yeah.
that I have read.
That's the hard part, right? Is aging.
Yeah.
Did it age well? Did
There
it
there are
follow?
some books that I read and I was just like, no, no, no. That
Um,
happens.
oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
Yeah, one more, I think.
one more I have. Yeah. I will say The Escherman from Tier Napper. If
Okay.
you want, yeah, that's cyberpunk. It's near
Yeah.
future. It's set in China. The protagonist is Australian, of course, because he writes mostly Australian characters. And it's very fast paced. You are following some sort of thug that he's
Okay.
doing thug stuff in a cyberpunk world. But there is also a lot of discussion around memory because the people in that book, they have like an implant and
Right.
they get chips of memory. They just don't know the memories there. And
Mm.
because they are so used to using that, whenever they take the chip away, they are just can't remember what they had for breakfast.
Oh,
And yeah, so there is a lot of discussion around that, and also around how the protagonist changes because of how his memories are changed,
yeah.
right? So
Interesting. Yeah, that's
if you like cyberpunk and quick, fast-paced thrillers, especially,
yeah.
you're going to love it because it's a very good book. He writes very well as well. So, yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Always love
And
book
I think that
recommendations.
actually that one, 36th Street, that's also from him.
Yes.
So the
Okay.
main character of 36th Street, I think it's a secondary character on the Escherman.
Oh, okay. Okay, so
So,
there is a tie
and
there.
yeah, and the Escherman, I think it happens 10 or 15 years after, but they are standalones. You can read them in any order. So,
Yeah.
but if you
Yeah.
read 36th Street, you are going to love the other because you have the same character coming across. So,
Yeah. I do love standalones, but being able to play with multiple
yeah.
standalones and characters interlocking, yeah, that's
And
always fun.
I have a bonus one, if I
Yeah,
may. Yeah.
absolutely.
So for self-published author Thomas J. Divens, he
Yeah.
writes grimdark, and I think it's the most beautiful grimdark prose I have seen. He blends prose with poetry, like his book, his series Vermin of the Old Empire. You get some event, and then you get a chapter which is like a song or a poem that actually tells you what happened, but in a very poetic way. And sometimes it is very incorrect because you just saw the events happening, but then you get the poem of as how
Right.
the event starts. And yeah, he writes both beautifully. I don't know how he does it. He has a very specific style, and even though it's grimdark, it doesn't get gory or explicit without sense. So
Yeah.
I will say it's a relatively safe book to read if you want just the grimness and the
Yeah.
hopelessness and the mayhem, but not everything else. And
Yeah.
that series, they are all novellas. So I'm
Okay.
very short novella, so 120 pages and so it's a
Quick
very
read.
quick read. Yeah. And the
And
novellas, if I recall, the novellas are also standalone. So they all start in the aftermath of the same battle, but they
oh,
follow different characters. And so every novella follows a different group of characters, starts on the same point and divides. It's a
yeah.
very ingenious way of telling the
Wow.
whole. Yeah.
Yeah, and people are more willing to try out a novella because the short page
Yeah.
count, right? When they've got those massive TBRs, they need a slump buster. Yeah, and
Yeah.
if they're standalones each, that's yeah, easy for people to pick up. Thank you for sharing those.
Try it and let me know what you think. I think you may like it.
Absolutely.
I know that you have read some very grim darks like Anna Smith's Spark and so on,
Yeah.
so you may like that one.
Yeah, thank you. I'm definitely gonna check that out. I've taken a note there because, I mean, as if I don't have enough books to read, but it's a novella. What is that? Can we call that book math? It's a novella. I can read it sooner.
You can read it
Um,
very quick.
yeah, exactly. So, I wanna say thank you so much for sharing all of that, for chatting with me today. Where can people follow you, find out more, and what's next?
Yeah, so you can find me almost everywhere as Livia J. Elliot. So I'm on Twitter, on Threads, on Blue Sky, on Instagram, and also on Substack as
Yeah.
Livia J. Elliot. And my podcast is called Books and Done. You can find it on every platform as Books and Done. On YouTube, it's under my name, so Livia J. Elliot. And then the Kickstarter for Dance With Me, we are already on the 5th stretch goal. So it's going to happen. We just need to do some extra things and stretch goals and inserts. Sorry.
Pretty your book.
But you can just search for Livia J. Elliot Dance With Me on Kickstarter and you will get that there. And yeah, we also have, if I may say,
Yeah,
we are
absolutely.
dropping a surprise on the 13th at 3 p.m. So there is,
Oh,
yeah, I'm just going to share something that's, in my opinion, pretty mind blowing, but I'm biased. So yeah, so
so stay
May
tuned.
13th, yeah,
Follow Livia.
it's related to this one, but it's something pretty mind blowing. May 13th, 3 p.m. EST. So you may find it
Okay.
there. And in terms of what's coming, so if you want to read my essays and literary analysis or theme analysis as well, you can check my podcast or you can subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. So liviajelliot.substack.com. And I don't bombard people, but you can even find things like, for example, the last one I posted was about how the use of commas and sentence structure can convey speed. So I generally
Mm,
those type of analysis. And if you subscribe, you can get the ebook for this one for free. This is the other
oh,
series. So this is my grimdark philosophical records of the orders. This one is Tales of the Bookshelves, so two different series. And then I'm actually writing right now. I'm running a Kickstarter and writing a book, which is a bit crazy, if I may say, but I'm writing the first book for this one. And
oh,
hopefully, I'm hoping to get it out at the end of the year. Hopefully, fingers
very
crossed.
nice.
So, yeah.
So, lots to check out, lots to look forward
Yeah.
to. Definitely go check out the Kickstarter. I was lucky enough to be able to read it early. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you for reading it. Yeah.
And yeah, if you love books that just pull you in emotionally,
Oh, thank you.
drag you through the dirt, and then spit you back out in the most wholesome and tragically beautiful way, definitely check out Dance with Me. And in the meantime, thank you so much again, Livia, for joining me, sharing all of that, and for everyone watching now and in the
Oh,
recording. Thank you for joining us.
thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm so sorry my headphones died midway.
It's all right. We made it through. We made it to the end. The
Yeah.
headphones lasted. It
Oh,
just makes it
I
interesting.
I have
Yeah,
one more thing to share. Like, you know that we
absolutely.
are doing invited authors to unearth the stories. We
Yes.
may have one or two more authors lined up for the second half of the year. So
Oh,
we're still
nice.
chatting about them. So it may or may
Yeah,
not happen, depending, because it also depends on their timeline. It's not as
absolutely.
easy. Yeah. So that
Yeah,
also may also happen. Stay tuned. Check the app now. It's
yeah.
free to install. You can read everything there. Yeah.
Brilliant. Lots of stories to check out. And yeah, so go check out the links in the description below. Go support the Kickstarter or check it out. And in the meantime, thank you so much, everyone. Happy Mother's Day again to all the moms out there. And as always, take care of yourselves.